Thought I lost my apples for a moment.
Your marbles or your apples?
I like them apples.
It's been a good long while since I seen Good Will Hunting.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's what that quote's from.
Well, I think it came a long time before.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
never heard it before that, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
They didn't just make that up for that
Yeah.
movie. To me,
Yeah.
they did, because
I understand. The boys from Boston, what do they call them? The Easties? No. Southeast from South
Yeah.
Boston. Southeast.
Now you like them apples.
Yeah, them apples. Them apples.
That's right.
Yeah, you gotta put that in there. Yeah.
Nice.
But yes, it's always it's good to see you, Justin.
Speaking of apples,
How about
it's good
them
to
apples?
see you, Mark.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations. What are we talking about?
well,
I know what we're talking about.
do you?
but-
Good. Shoot,
I'm waiting for you to.
I thought for a moment. I was, most of these topics, I'd say, probably come out of a aha moment of some type.
I
Realistic.
think I know, yeah.
Yeah, because I think, we live our lives, and I think at times, we can fall into a complacency when we're just doing the daily grind day after day and that kind of thing. And it was just it was interesting for me because I heard a sermon this weekend, and it was just it was a moment of conviction for me. And it got me to thinking about spirituality, because I think our culture, and myself, we tend to see it a lot around us, this aspect of coexist, the yin and the yang, that there's this spiritual dynamic of good and evil that's always in balance, this aspect of what we might call dualism, you know what I mean, where there's two equal parts and they're just vying against one another, but
This
yet
eternal struggle of
yeah,
good and evil, and
but
it's in every movie basically.
yes, and I think
Disney movie anyway.
yes,
Yeah.
and I have to admit, I think in some ways, even and it made me think about some of the discussions we've had, even in the concept of the stick, that there's this aspect of dualism where one is opposed to the other, but yet they complete each other in some kind of harmonious way. You follow me? And that's not a judgment on that model.
Wait, you were supposed to say no offense. Offense taken, Mark.
But it
I'm gonna get my stick out.
you got offended, and I didn't even have to say no offense. See, that's why I say it.
I was waiting for it.
I'm learning. I'm working on it. But I think, I was just reminded of how our desire for balance and, just this dualistic mindset that, everything has an equal and opposite. I was made aware that I have been maybe misled. And I don't want, and I when I'm thinking about misled, I'm thinking about the fact that I talk with others, and I take that very seriously when I think about the fact that I don't want, if I've been deceived, I don't want to pass that deception on to other people. You follow me? That's where my conviction, that's where the weight, if you will, of even what we do here, is kind of convicting.
Yeah.
And so it got me thinking about that from that aspect. And it was interesting to recognize for me in the process of this sermon, it was interesting to recognize that from my new perspective, there really isn't this dualism in place. because
Was it 3 instead? Maybe 4? 4ism?
No, I don't think they're balanced.
Yeah, I know.
And it was interesting because as I was reading about it,
it was a bad dad joke. Sorry.
Sorry. I guess in the process of my desire to share my perspective, I'm a little more focused. So I apologize.
You're swimming a little deeper than I was. That's my fault. I'm sorry. I'm coming. Let me get some.
Don't you even worry about it. It is good. But it made me think about it. And it was a refreshing thing to think about, actually. When I was in the process of this sermon, I was listening. They were talking about how Jesus had gone through the tombs where Legion I think it's Matthew.
Well, it's probably in multiple.
Well, Matthew has 2 men.
Okay.
Where there's 2 men, and but either way, it's just interesting. It's both right before Jesus casts these spirits out of these gentlemen into the pigs.
Yeah.
You familiar with that one?
Yeah, I didn't think it was gentlemen. I thought it was one guy.
Well, Legion is one, but and this was what the sermon was about. It's basically there's two separate stories in Scripture. Okay. Yeah. And
but the pigs that only came out of Legion, right?
No, there is another aspect where there were 2 guys.
Oh.
And I want to say it was Matthew. I apologize. I should have prepared a little, as usual. I should have prepared. But what they basically come up and say, to Jesus, they're basically saying, hey, we know who you are. Mm-hmm. We know that there's going to come a day when your authority is going to completely do away with evil. Mm-hmm. That was really kind of what struck me, because that does away with that dualistic perspective from my dynamic. And I think it's been freeing for me to be able to recognize that we're not just kind of, this balance that you eke out a little bit of.
Yeah, it's not like this battle where, we took that town, and it's like, they took it back. And
yes.
Like this kind of, never-ending battle of good and evil, and some days evil's winning, some days good is winning, and that whole thing. And the fronts are moving every day, and you're always checking in, like, are we winning today? Are we losing today? That kind of idea, right?
Yes, very much so. That kind of idea, and it was, and I think that's what I desire, to offer people that I talk with, and I think part of my job, I wrestle with individuals from a spiritualistic perspective based on where they're coming from. Not everybody talks with me as a Christian, that kind of thing. And, and there's definitely different, spiritualistic tendencies people have, and they've grown up in a specific religion, or maybe they've grown up religious, but then they've kind of jettisoned that to have this humanistic dynamic, those kind of things. And that's where it was kind of coming back to for me, because I think I have kind of developed this model of balance, which in some ways I like, and I think in some ways it's our continuums, represent a sort of balance between 2 extremes. And
even the idea of polarizing topics, we're always trying to get that pendulum to where it's, I'm showing you my hand, a pendulum, a board on a pendulum. I'm trying to get it in balance so
Seesaw.
that it's, exactly. So that it's no longer swinging, it's kind of balanced. Yeah, we're always trying to get to that equilibrium.
Yes.
Yep.
And so that was where, that's when I heard this sermon, it was just kind of like this breath of fresh air for me in this aspect, to because it wasn't like I hadn't known. I mean, granted, I learned a lot, because what part of what the sermon was about was when Jesus is crossing over the Sea of Galilee. The two areas that are 2 references. One would be like the version that basically said Jesus went to Southport. Okay. And there was this one guy named Legion. The other version basically says that Jesus went to Brunswick County and there were two guys. You follow me? But either way, he cast the demons out of these fellas into this herd of pigs. And so that was kind of, it was neat to hear. It's like, okay, it's not that scripture is ever in controversy. It's just being able to understand the facets from which each, writer wrote their story. And to me, but what came out of that was that dynamic of being able to say, okay, yeah, in this spiritual realm, we do recognize what we are at war, if I may say so, kind of that Ephesians 6, type dynamic that we do wrestle. And I think sometimes in our wrestling, it can seem daunting, because it does seem as if there's this war front where
cosmic battle.
Yes, where, and like all good movies, it's like, well, somebody's got to do something that completely shifts the dynamic or else, humanity is going to die, that kind of thing. But that's where it was coming from, is it's like, okay, all of that was satisfied. Someone did do something and that kept everybody from dying. And yet and being able to recognize that in those moments, even the spiritual realm, as I was looking at it from that dynamic, recognizes the authority of who Jesus Christ is. And there was no doubt, because when, in that spiritual realm, when anyone addressed Jesus, it was like, I know who you are.
Yeah.
And so often it reminds me that, and I realize that's out of the Bible and that kind of thing. But so often I'm mindful of the fact that, if we live in this spiritual culture, and yet I'm willing to recognize that when we think of evil acknowledges who Jesus is. Yeah. And there's no doubt there. And it's not that it's a balanced equation. Yeah. It's a matter of, deceiving and destroying as much as possible until that day comes when it's going to end.
So it's a lot of good stuff. That's good.
That's the nutshell of, that was a nutshell of Father's Day for me this weekend.
Nice. So a couple things I was thinking about when you were sharing that. First of all, the balance thing, right? So I was thinking about balance.
Yeah.
Balance only works when there's a certain law at play of physics. That law is gravity.
I hear you.
Right?
Sure.
So you think about balance, you think about a scale where you balance things out.
A balance beam.
You think about seesaw, like you said, the action of seesawing. You think about when you're trying to keep your balance, right?
Sure.
And you're kind of balancing on a whatever.
Right and left.
Yeah, or like on what do you call that? A balance beam or the wire. What do you?
Oh, tightrope.
Thank you.
No problem. Ding, 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 ding.
You win. Any of those aspects, and none of those will work if you just go up about 5 miles, right?
Sure.
From our atmosphere. I don't know how. I just made up a number.
Oh, okay. However, I'm with you.
Till you get out of the gravitational pull.
Okay.
And there's no longer gravity. None of those concepts work. Balance isn't a thing. Right?
I hear where you're coming from.
And the reason I say that is because this yin-yang, this balance of good and evil, in my heart, is definitely a thing. Right? And when the laws of this creation that he's put me in are at work, I do have to contend, and you wouldn't argue that, right? Like you wouldn't say we don't have to battle. We don't have to battle against the evil or against our flesh. I know that's not your point at all. You're making an awesome point, which I'm trying to get to as well.
That's okay.
Which is when you zoom out, to a universal level, balance is a silly thing.
Oh, I hear where you're coming
right?
from.
There's no such thing as, I mean, there is, and I would even argue that he's built balance into the solar system. He's built balance into the universe, but, so obviously the analogy isn't perfect, but
I hear you.
I'm just thinking about how that concept of a scale just doesn't apply once you zoom out just a little bit.
Sure.
And then you still got all kinds of zooming to do to still even get to the edge of the universe where that concept is kind of silly, right?
Sure.
And I think of that as an analogy for what you're saying, and even the demons and how they recognize there's no balance here.
Yes,
right. And
agreed.
When I zoom out, because we came from zoomed out, we know the big picture. We know what the universe looks like, and we know that these laws only apply in this one tiny little context. And this guy in front of us lives outside of that context. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I think that's when the Bible says, "Greater is He that's in you than he that's in the world." That's what it's talking about. It's like, no, you don't understand the spirit of the God who created this universe that abides above and beyond all of those rules of good and evil. He lives in you, so you're good.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and I think that's I think as you were talking that balance tends to be our human way of making such a cosmic force or design, I'll call it, understandable.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's where that complacency comes into play, because at times I just want to make things understandable.
Yes.
So I use my human construct to basically say, okay, this is how it is.
Yep.
And I think in the aspect that can be part of a deception over time, because I think in some ways, from my perspective, that can be on my part, even the pride that I've got an understanding of this, this created design. Okay. And this is my teaspoon way of holding a piece of that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
In the midst of the whole universe.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You're making me think of the message I heard this weekend and the thoughts that came out of that, which was this idea of Christ is our cornerstone.
Okay, sure.
And so all other building materials reference off of that cornerstone. And so if you put it incorrectly, or your cornerstone is just a bad cornerstone,
oh sure,
then your building will be out of whack, right?
Sure.
And I was in a small group. We talked a little bit about this, and I was talking about how knowledge could be a cornerstone, right? Which is kind of what you're saying. So if I build everything based off of knowledge is most important, then I'm always going to have gaps.
Sure,
it's never going to line up because we can't know it all. And even if we even if it was knowable, available to us, our brain and our time cannot contain it.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're always going to have gaps. We're always going to have to fill them in with analogies or concepts that kind of cover a whole gamut of things just to be able to look at it. You know?
Yeah.
And I think like that happens throughout the course of history and science. We've discovered more and more about science, but everything we discover about science tends to open up these little side room doors that we're like, oh crap, we can't open that one yet because we don't understand it enough. Yeah. But at least we got into this next room and we can understand more about everywhere we left because we're now in here.
Sure.
And we recognize, but there's just so many more rooms that we thought this was the last door, right? Kind of idea. And so, it's like this and then you think about the fact that, again, the God of the universe, the one who kind of lives above all of this and has a perfect understanding of it all, tries to communicate with us, the ant, right?
Sure.
About what an ocean is or what, a skyscraper is. Yep. And because we can't possibly conceptualize what a skyscraper is, he uses words like, it's kind of like a big stick. Right? And we go, okay, got it, God. But you said it was a big stick. He's like, no, it's just that you can't understand that. And I feel like the Bible has, when we think about contradictions, you think about all the names of God. It's like, well, is he a lion or is he a lamb? Which one is he, right? Because he references both. And if we're going to be literal and stick to, well, it's this one or it's that one, then we're going to have to argue with this other part of the Bible, and I feel like there's a lot of theological concepts that we also want that balance.
Sure.
Right? Where we want to say, like God's sovereignty versus free will, for instance, we've talked about in the past, and we're like, well, it has to be in balance, or I have to choose one or the other. But I think it's kind of like he's describing a skyscraper and or a shipping container. It's like they're both things, and you can't understand them. So we're gonna go a stick and leaf in a pond.
Sure.
And
I hear you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
It's kind of a rabbit trail, but
well, no, it's kind of like when Jesus talked to his disciples. The kingdom of heaven is like.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's each one of those pictures makes a greater understanding of what the kingdom of heaven is like in this aspect of a concept that's too big to explain from just one human dynamic.
Yeah, and we benefit from those moments where Jesus was a kindly teacher and that he said it's like.
Yeah.
So we're like, we can understand, this is another facet, But exactly. I think the Bible is full of facets, but we don't always get the benefit of the is like part to be able to say, well, I can't, in other words, I can't throw out this part of the Bible because this part of the Bible says this. I have to somehow reconcile that they both can coexist in that universe that's beyond me that I can't understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where it came from, and I appreciate your ability to bring the cornerstone, because I think knowledge is a good thing.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I'm willing to recognize that, the knowledge that I have has gaps in it. And I think that's where this weekend came from for me, is being willing to recognize that I saw some gaps.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing.
No.
It's the ability to be able to say, okay, I need to have this awareness that there is this continual battle, and there is this spiritual realm, that we enter into. And I think that's the dynamic that we can wrestle with, is we have this physical realm, and I don't think there are few people who would definitely deny that, we are spiritual beings, because I think, most everyone has this concept of good and evil, even in religions, if you will. And that was kind of what brought that in a more powerful way to me when I was able to hear that, maybe not necessarily for the first time, but for me, it was kind of an eye-opening. It's like, it was a good reminder to be able to say, okay, there is this authority that's over it all. And whether we acknowledge who Jesus was, even that spiritual realm is willing to say, hey, oh, Son of God, what are you doing here? Is today the day that ends it all? Yeah. Because that's really what the question was. Yeah. And it's like, no, that day hasn't come yet, but and I think it just was a neat little opportunity. And then that's when I started that wrestling for me of being able to say, okay, it's not just like you thought it was as far as this balance. Not that the stick and other things aren't, are evil. It's
I'm
just
offended again. Yeah. No, I get it.
But it made me think about it in that way of being able to say, okay, how do we wrestle with this this spiritual nature? And I think the battle is real, but I also think the reality of it is the war is won. Yeah. And it's being a man. And I think, when the CR dynamics came to mind too, because, I think so often in our shame, we can tend to see evil as this huge thing and there's no way to overcome it. And I think, that's where Jesus as our higher power comes into play and say, no, there's a way. I've already dealt with this. You just need to trust me, in faith from that perspective. And it was just, that was where I was coming from.
It kind of, the thing too is like, if you start to get a glimpse of that, of like kind of the imbalance, right? The true imbalance. I think that could I think that's likely a meat subject versus a milk subject. So if you're not familiar with what I'm saying,
Sure.
Essentially the Bible talks about as new believers, the teaching you need is more like milk for a baby, right? Like it needs to be kind of the fundamentals, the ground level things, and then
no
as
teeth yet. You can't chew it up.
And as you mature, you need meat. You need to be able to chew. And I definitely feel like understanding this to the level, like to the level that you're talking about does require some chewing, some teeth, and
Sure.
if you don't have that, I think it could be pretty hard to wrestle with. And why I say that is wait, you're telling me he has that much, it's that imbalance, and yet I still have to, deal with evil. Like, why would he let any of it exist then? Why not just make all of our lives perfect and happy?
Sure.
It's like,
and that was another reminder, I think, in some ways, because as we, have our own family discussions over, topics and so forth, that whole aspect, John, has a friend that he's talking with, that really wrestles with that aspect of, how could a good God let bad things happen to good people,
Exactly.
And I think that is part of that when we see it from that ground level warfare, that, but we lost over here.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. We won over here, but it just seems like that's inconsistent with my human sense of balance.
Yeah.
If there is this great God, come on now.
Yeah.
We should just live in
especially if you're in, one of the towns that just got captured by the enemy. And it's like, but we're winning. Well, it sure doesn't look like it where I stand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can totally empathize with, someone going through some stuff and
no doubt,
or in a situation where their family or whoever, is going through some evil, right?
Yeah.
And going, but this doesn't jive. You're saying there's a good God who loves me. Well, this is proof that's either not true or he's, it's not true one sense or another. Like he doesn't exist or he does and he doesn't like me. I mean, that doesn't seem right either,
Yep.
So I think that's, again, can be some of the tough wrestling stuff.
No doubt.
And the Bible has plenty to say about all that. Don't misunderstand me. It talks, like one of the verses says he's not slow concerning his promise, but he's not willing that any should perish, right? Because they were asking, like, why hasn't Jesus come back yet? We're waiting for this, and he's gonna make it all better. Kind of the same idea. He's gonna right all the wrongs, fix all the bad. Why isn't he here yet? He's like, well, he's not slow about that promise.
Sure,
but he cares more that more would come to him, than that. Those
he's patient.
Yeah, exactly. And so that the Bible has plenty to say about the concepts of those things. And even Paul talks about in Romans 9, like, you might ask these questions, but it's like asking a potter why he formed the clay the way he did. It's like, you're clay. You can't understand the purpose,
Yeah.
And I think understanding good versus evil requires a view that we cannot have, and therefore we have to trust the one that has the view that we cannot have, right?
Sure.
We have to be so zoomed out at a universal level to understand it that we cannot do that, and therefore we have to rely on him. It requires faith. I mean, that he's never going to remove that requirement from this journey, right?
Doubt. Sure.
And to the degree that that's what Hebrews 11 talks about. It says, by faith, these people, we'll see the kingdom of heaven. It has to do with the fact that faith is the requirement.
Sure.
So there's always going to be bits and pieces of our theology and belief that we won't have the full answer. We have to rely on, well, you do, and therefore I rely on you. And that's, what I mean?
Yeah. And even that faith is a gift that's given for those who want to accept it very much, in that concept of, being able to recognize that, it's not something we have to muster up. It's something that's even provided. Yeah. And if to the degree that we have the ability to choose it when we see that opportunity is a provision. So it's just, And I think here again, as I was thinking about, spiritualism in our world, I think if we're trying, I think so often what can derail us, maybe in some ways, is this ability to create heaven on earth type dynamic, to where if this is the best that it gets, this isn't very good on certain days.
Yeah.
And that can be discouraging, because I'm striving, I'm working, and granted, even as I say those things from my perspective, I recognize that's quite often where it comes from, is my pride. I want to do it my way, and I don't always necessarily consider, that I could be deceived in some way that's saying, okay, it's about right now. Mm-hmm. It's about what I can build up right now. It's about the things that I can establish now. And, it doesn't take too awful long to think about it in that context of, okay, there's a lot of people that tried to make it here on earth, and that's not what God talks with us about. It's like, seek first the kingdom of heaven and those kind of things. So, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah.
You chewing on something?
Yeah. I kind of lost my thought, actually.
That's all right. You pulled your phone out. And you were going to look.
Megan wasn't needing me. And
oh, okay. Yeah. I got you. I thought
it wasn't Megan, and I was trying to figure out what it was, and then poof, that thought was gone. So this is why Mark doesn't look at his phone. He's a smart man.
It's all good. Yeah. It's about being present in the moment. And I understand where you're coming from.
That's right.
Because if it was Megan, we'd want to know.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, we're going on vacation tomorrow. So if there's needs that you might need.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're excited about that. That's why we're recording on a Tuesday, which seems so wrong.
It does seem,
seems a little off.
Yes, definitely changing my my disciplines for the week, but that's all right.
Yeah.
It's good.
That's true. That's hard for you.
I can do it.
Look at you. You're here.
Yeah.
You're ready. And you brought your own subject.
Well,
it was good. So,
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark.
No problem. Yes. So that being said, this is how we see it.
He was giving me a little space to see if that thought would come back.
Yeah.
It didn't.
Yeah.
So, but that was good stuff. I appreciate it.
No problem. Happy to share.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.